But sitting there watching them, make like triangle shapes and squares and rectangles, things with right angles. I mean, it was very bizarre to watch. So, when you see something like that, or you see something where it's flying, and there have been multiple ones, especially in South America, where you see them flying, and they have this kind of like smoke trail, and it's a very thick smoke trail that they emanate as they fly along. It's like, what is that? I really don't know. I mean, it's strange.
Yeah, I guess so. My goodness.
Yeah, it's like the flying humanoids, right? That down in South America, they get these videos of basically people flying through the air, and it's like, even as a researcher, you look at that, because especially as a researcher, like, you try to be grounded in science, right? And you see a video of some person like flying through the air, and you're like, okay, that I cannot explain. I don't understand it, but boy, is it entertaining.
Yeah, I know. I've seen so many of those flying humanoids, and there's reports about them all over the place. I don't even know where to go with that.
Oh yeah. I really don't know. I mean, you want to have the easy explanation of it's a guy in a jetpack,
right?
Or I don't know.
Or even one of them little drones dressed up with something. Or I mean, where do you go? Yeah, we're like, where do you go with that? I don't even know what I'd do if I seen one of those. Jeez.
By default, I have a tendency to try to apply a military-industrial complex explanation. So, a lot of times when I've seen the videos of the flying humanoids, that they don't really appear to be moving. That they're just like, it's just like a human body like flying through the air. And I find that unlikely, because people move. You just move. I mean, you can't, no human can sit and, be locked in one position for too long, or, it starts to hurt, or it's just uncomfortable. And so for a long time, I believed that what you were seeing is a dummy of some sort, or a robot of some sort that's attached to some sort of device that they're testing.
Right. And like you just said, a person or even a humanoid or whatever it's going to be, they're not just going to be, stiff. It's going to be, it's so that gives
no.
Yeah, so it kind of gives me the inclination that it's somebody trying to do a hoax or something. Something's not right.
Something's not right about it. And usually, I try to apply something called Occam's razor. Basically, it's this idea that was put forth by a guy named William of Occam. And Occam's razor basically says that the simplest answer is probably the right one. And, Occam's razor on flying humanoids is that it's some sort of a drone, or it's some sort of like a manufactured body attached to something that they're trying to test.
That's kind of what I tend to, more of a drone dressed up with something, or because drones now. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, maybe the idea is to confuse you.
Yeah.
If you go back into yesteryear, back into the 50s, right? That when they were developing the A-12, which became the SR-71, the A-12 was actually longer, faster, and flew higher, but it was silver. It was a big silver SR-71, right? Blackbird.
Yeah. And
so it would take off, and obviously it would fly for a while. They're designed to fly for quite some time. And, people would see this silver spike go across the sky. And the first thing that they would say is, oh, my God, what is that? And they would go to the literature of the time and then be like, oh, it's a UFO. The Nordics are going to come down and fix all of our problems and usher us into the interspecies, federation, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Soviets at the time were not quite as gullible as that, and so they recognized that most likely it was some sort of a test aircraft, and so they started to send some of their agents in to infiltrate some of the UFO groups to go on sky watches to see the planes fly by. And meanwhile, the CIA and the FBI are also infiltrating the groups to watch the Russians, the Soviets, watching our planes. And at the same time, the CIA, who had funded the A-12 program, was actively putting out stories that they were UFOs to try to cover up what it was. So, if you see something weird fly across the sky, the first thing that everybody's going to say is, well, it's an alien. Well, the first thing they'll say is, golly gee, that looks weird. The second thing they're going to say is, well, it's an alien. And, I would say that it's probably not an alien, but golly gee, it sure does look weird.
Yeah. I know the first thing
some of them are aliens, but
yeah, usually what I say when I see something weird is probably our government. That's usually what I say.
Our government, the Russians, the English, the French, who knows who it is. But if you see it in the United States, probably ours.
Yeah, and it's funny, a month ago, broad daylight, something told me to look up. I looked up, and I am telling you, this was a cigar shaped, and it was extremely, extremely high up, and it was going extremely fast. And I don't know what it was, but if it was ours, it was some technology we got that can fly extremely high and fast.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it had no wings at all, and there was no contrail, no plume, no nothing, and it was extremely fast and cigar shaped. And it had to be kind of big because it looked small, and it had a little bit of size to it, but it was really high. I mean, I'm talking. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 100,000 feet. I mean, it was just incredible height.
It's funny. It's funny that you mention that because, one of the things that I think a lot of people who are new to ufology or, kind of mysterious stuff in general, one of the things that they do is, that they're usually brought into the subject because they saw something or they watched something on TV and it looked interesting and they thought, well, I'm going to go try to see something. But, a lot of people now are coming into it and they haven't been digesting this stuff that's, 20, 30 years old. But one of the things that I think is missed a lot of times nowadays is that, DARPA, there's a thing called DARPA, which is basically a DOD research group. And DARPA, they experiment on a lot of things. They, computers, computation, cell processors, quantum computing, drones. I mean, they work on a lot of crazy robotics, lasers, all kinds of stuff. But one of the things, and I actually asked a guy who was a DARPA engineer this once, one of the things about them is that conservatively, and they're at least 100 years ahead of us in technology. And when I asked the guy, I said, I know, I'm not going to ask you what you do. I'm not that dumb. I don't expect you to spill the beans here. But I said, I have one question. I said, a lot of times in the literature, they talk about it being, 50 years ahead or 100 years ahead. And he looked at me and just shook his head. He said, nope. And I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking, well, maybe that's propaganda. Maybe they're like 5 years ahead. And he's like, nope. And I said, okay, are we talking like 2 years ahead? He's like, nope, more like 300 years ahead. So, you have this very small, relatively small group that's working on these technologies that are very, very, very sophisticated. And you get kind of glimpses on occasion. I forget the guy's name, but he's head of the Skunk Works. He was at a Caltech alumni dinner, and I think Jan Harzan was actually there because he's the guy who runs MUFON now. He was he's a Caltech alumni. And the guy, his name escapes me, but the guy said, in his remarks, because he was kind of giving some, a little talk as a Caltech alumni himself, and he was saying that the quote that made it out of there, I mean, he spoke for a while, and nobody seems to care about the rest of the stuff he spoke about. The one thing he said is that he was talking about DARPA, and he was talking about the future of aircraft and the future of space travel. And, this kind of, because look, we're almost up on 2020 here. If you like Blade Runner, Roy Batty his inset date was 2019. I mean, we're supposed to have off-world colonies and, spaceships flying through the air and whatever. And he was saying, he was basically saying, we're getting there. And the comment that he actually made was, I think it was something to the effect of, not only do we have the technology to take ET home, I have the contract.
Huh.
That's a very powerful thing to say.
I would say so. And 300 years in advance, that kind of tells me that they probably have anti-gravity technology or something along those lines. Right.
Oh, I'm positive. I witnessed it.
Oh, you did?
I mean, yeah. So, it's funny. And I'll ask you a funny question when I'm done explaining what happened to me, because I would like to hear your response to it.
Mm-hmm.
So one night, I had to leave work very, very late. And it was about 1 a.m, and I was driving home. And I was driving through a valley. And it's a pretty narrow valley. The freeway cuts along one side of it, and then it kind of goes down at the base of the valley and kind of creeps up. And it's surrounded on either side by these hills. And there was a very low fog layer, which, where I live, we get fog a lot. And there was a very low fog layer. The fog layer was just above the hills. So maybe 500 feet, 600 feet. And I'm driving along on a fairly desolate freeway, and there's nobody else on the road. It's just me. And I'm driving along, and I see this thing start to emerge out of the fog. And my first reaction was, oh, it's an airplane, because that's the approach pattern. That is one of the approach patterns to we have two big, we have three big airports here. And the one in Oakland, that's actually the approach route. It can be, depending on which runway you're on. And so it's black. It's like matte black. You could see the panels. You could see the rivets. And as it starts to come through the fog layer, I can see that it's a triangle. And it was moving very slowly.
It was a triangle.
It was a triangle.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And it was enormous. And it had to have been at least the size of a 787 or a 747.
Now, that kind of fits the description of the one that came through Arizona back in 97, I think it was, or something.
Right, the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah, the Phoenix Lights. Okay, go ahead.
But I saw the whole thing, and it was illuminated. Because one of the things that happens here is that we've got so many damn people that the light comes up and hits the fog layer and actually illuminates the fog layer, because the fog layer reflects it. And so, the fog layer is actually, when you're driving out in the middle of nowhere and there's a fog layer, it's kind of like almost like a street light. But I watched this thing descend through it. I never saw the whole thing. I just saw the bottom of it as it went over my head.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that everybody asks me is, well, why didn't you take a photo of it? And it's a funny question. I thought at the time, because I watched it, I even watched it in the rearview mirror. At the time, I had a cell phone. I had an iPhone. I could have easily taken a photo of it. But I was so dumbfounded by what I was seeing, it didn't even dawn on me. And then it dawned on me. And I thought, well, I'm driving through here at 1 a.m. I'm going to pull over and be snapping photos, and some guy's going to run me over.
Yeah.
And or I'm going to pull over and be taking photos, and whoever's in that thing's going to be pissed off and react negatively to my presence. If I'm in a car and I'm doing 80, I'm a moving target.
Yeah.
But everybody thinks that when you see this stuff, the first thing that you do is whip out your camera. And I was so dumbfounded by what I was seeing that it literally, my mind went blank. I literally was just trying to process what I was seeing. And I think that's a thing that's lost a lot of times.
Listen, it's funny you say that, but the sighting I had a month ago, I was so in awe and dumbfounded by it, just like you're saying, that instead of videoing it, I snapped off a few pictures. That was it, and I was lucky I even did that. Then I was like, why didn't I video this? I was just so dumbfounded and awe. It literally just stopped me in my tracks, like you're mentioning.
Yeah, for the next 45 minutes, I'm telling myself, my God, I should have filmed this.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Yep.
The same thing. Yep.
But it's so mind-blowing. A lot of people haven't seen anything, and it's the same when you see Bigfoot Although I tried to take a picture of that, but that didn't work out because it was too far. But it, when you